I had been accredited to the Ashvane Senate for 140 days, before I understood what the Hour of Stillness actually was. My press credentials let me sit in the gallery above the floor and file dispatches nobody on the homeworld read with any urgency. Council theater, my editors called it. And most days they were right. The Ashvane Imperium ran on ceremony, the way older empires run on inertia. Long sessions, longer silences between motions, a chamber that prized the appearance of deliberation over the fact of it. The human delegation had been seated below me for nearly a year by then, 12 representatives sent to renegotiate the trade corridor through Ashvane space, and in all that time I had never once seen them raise their voices. The Senate called the hour a curiosity, the kind of thing you note in a footnote and move past. Once a day, at an hour, the delegation never announced and never varied. All 12 of them stopped. They sat. They closed their eyes. They did not speak, did not eat, did not so much as shift their weight in the chair. For 60 minutes, 12 representatives of an entire species went still at the same instant, in different rooms, on different floors of the embassy, with no signal passing between them that any instrument in the building could detect. I asked Solarin about it once, early on, over a cup of something bitter in the embassy's narrow kitchen. She told me it was a discipline her people practiced, and nothing more, and the way she said it closed the subject as surely as a door. The Senate could not leave a closed door alone. 6 weeks into my posting, the embassy's environmental staff replaced the humidity regulators in the delegation's private quarters, a routine maintenance order signed off by 3 separate undersecretaries, none of whom would later admit to having read past the first paragraph. I noted the work order in passing and filed nothing. It was only later I learned what had actually been installed behind those vents, and how carefully the paperwork had been worded, so that no single signature carried the weight of the decision alone. A contract built, deliberately, to survive an inquiry that nobody expected would ever come. The arrays ran for 4 months. I know now what they were built to find: biometric drift, sleep patterns, some chemical tell that would explain the synchrony, or better still, expose it as theater for a species that understood theater better than most. What the arrays found instead was nothing. No pulse elevation, no measurable change at all, hour after hour, delegation after delegation, as if the 12 of them simply switched off and switched back on, within the same second, in 12 separate rooms, with no wire and no whisper between them. Blank data unsettles an analyst more than bad data ever will. By the 3rd month, the unease in the Senate's Intelligence Directorate had hardened into something closer to fear, and fear, in that chamber, always finds its way onto an agenda. I heard, secondhand and unofficially, that Director Heskammeril had begun briefing select senators on what he called the silence problem, and that the briefings had stopped appearing on any calendar a journalist could request. The hearing was called under the heading of trade renewal. Nobody in the gallery believed that for long. The chamber held its tiers the way it always did, the senators rising in pale ranks above the floor, robes layered in formal gray-violet, their long skulls inclined forward in the particular attitude of a body that has already decided something and is only waiting for the record to catch up. Holographic ledgers hung in the air above the well, columns of Ashvane script scrolling too fast for the gallery to read, and somewhere below them the actual business of the day: trade tariffs, shipping lanes, nothing that should have filled a chamber this full. Chair Vethrain Corsa stood at the well, 4 eyes ringed in chitin, and none of them blinking in sequence, and read the delegation a question dressed as a courtesy. For 112 sessions, he said, your delegation has observed a daily period of total inactivity, unexplained and undisclosed. The Senate requires an accounting of what occurs during that hour. He did not say the arrays had found nothing. He did not have to. The whole chamber understood the real question underneath the polite one. What are you hiding? And is it a weapon? A row of junior senators near the rear had already begun consulting handheld ledgers, the way junior senators do when they sense a vote coming and want to be seen having an opinion ready for it. The senior envoy was a woman named Adiazi Solarin, gray at the temples, hands folded on the rail in front of her. She did not stand. None of the 12 stood. They sat exactly as they had sat through every session before this one, and they said nothing at all. Corsa waited. The silence stretched long enough that 2 junior senators in the 3rd tier began whispering to each other, and a low murmur ran the room's circumference like wind finding a crack in a wall. Still, the delegation did not move. I had covered enough sessions by then to know what that kind of quiet usually meant in this chamber. Contempt, or fear, or simple confusion. This was none of those. It had the stillness of people who had already had this conversation, somewhere else, and saw no reason to have it twice. "I will ask once more," Corsa said, and something in his voice had thinned. "What happens in that hour?" Solaren looked up. She did not raise her voice, and she did not explain. "Nothing happens," she said. "We listen." It was 4 words, no more, and the chamber did not know what to do with them. Corsa pressed, demanded clarification, demanded specifics, reminded the delegation that an empire does not extend hospitality to a guest who will not account for herself. Solaren let him finish. Then she reached into the satchel at her feet, set a single data plate on the rail in front of her, and slid it forward until it caught the light from the dome. "This is a recording," she said, "from the humidity regulator installed in Suite 4 of our quarters, on the 14th day after it was replaced. I believe Director Heska Marl of your Intelligence Directorate will recognize his own voice on it, discussing the annexation vote your Senate intends to bring once it has established sufficient cause." The chamber did not erupt. There was no shout, no scramble, none of the theater I had half expected after 4 months of waiting for this room to finally show its hand. What happened instead was quieter and worse. A kind of stillness moving through the tiers exactly opposite to the one we had spent months failing to explain. Senators going rigid in their seats one by one as the implication reached them, robes settling, eyes turning toward Director Amaral, who sat 3 rows back and said nothing at all, because there was nothing left for him to say. Corsa stood at the well with his question already answered and no way to take it back. The arrays his own directorate had installed to listen to 12 silent humans had been listening to the Senate the whole time, returning the favor down the same cable, recording the very planning sessions meant to justify the vote that recording now made impossible to hold. Whatever had been said in Suite 4 during those 60 minutes of human stillness, it had not been theater, and it had not been weakness. It had been discipline, 12 people choosing, every day, not to answer a question nobody had yet had the nerve to ask out loud. The trade renewal session adjourned without a vote. The annexation motion was never formally read into the record. I checked, more than once, in the weeks after, and found no trace of it anywhere a citizen of the Empire was permitted to look. Director Amaral did not appear at the next 3 sessions, and when he finally did, he sat in a different seat, several rows further back, and addressed no one. Chair Corsa kept his seat at the well, and kept his title, but I noticed, in the sessions that followed, that he no longer asked the delegation questions dressed as courtesies. He asked them plainly, or he did not ask at all. The delegation rose at the appointed hour, 12 of them in step, and walked out through the tall doors into the gallery light without a word to anyone. The way they walked out of every session, stillness folded back into them like something put away rather than spent. I watched them go from the rail above, the way I had watched them for 140 days, without once understanding what I was looking at. I filed my report that night, and have filed many since. None of them taught me as much as that hour did. The Senate had been right about one thing. In the end, we had been keeping something in that silence. They had simply assumed it was nothing,